What if you woke up tomorrow and 1/5 of the world's natural gas had simply vanished, not from a natural disaster, not from an accident, but from a single, calculated, and devastating military strike that the world's most powerful intelligence agencies failed to predict? What if the energy that heats your home, powers your hospitals, and fuels your economy was gone, not in weeks, not in days, but overnight? That is not a hypothetical. That is the scenario playing out right now, and what comes next will reshape the global order in ways most governments are not ready to admit. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is not the kind of breathless rumor that circulates on social media and disappears by morning. What you are about to hear is the result of deep analysis, verified intelligence reporting, and a hard look at a geopolitical chessboard that has been building toward this moment for years. Iran has struck. The global gas supply has taken a hit that analysts are already calling the single most consequential energy disruption of the 21st century. And the world is scrambling right now in real time to figure out what happens next. Before we go any further, you need to understand the scale of what we are talking about. Natural gas is not just a commodity. It is the backbone of modern civilization. It powers over 40% of Europe's electricity generation. It heats homes across the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Poland through brutal winters. It fuels industrial production from steel mills in the American Midwest to chemical plants along the Rhine. And it is the single largest source of energy for hundreds of millions of people who have no alternative, no backup plan, and no margin for error. When 20% of that supply disappears overnight, you are not talking about higher utility bills. You are talking about cascading systemic failures that touch every corner of the global economy simultaneously. So how did this happen? To understand the strike, you have to understand the strategic logic that led Iran here. For the better part of 2 decades, Iran has watched the West tighten the noose. Sanctions have strangled the Iranian economy. Diplomatic isolation has limited its global reach. Covert operations, cyber attacks, assassinations of nuclear scientists, sabotage of centrifuge facilities have slowed its military and nuclear programs. Iran has absorbed blow after blow, recalibrated and waited. And what Iran has been waiting for is the moment when a single, overwhelming strike could shift the entire balance of power in its favor. That moment, according to every piece of evidence now emerging, has arrived. Now here is where it gets deeply alarming. The infrastructure that Iran targeted was not chosen randomly. It was selected after years of reconnaissance, infiltration, and strategic analysis of the global energy grid's most critical and most vulnerable choke points. Intelligence officials in Washington and London are now privately admitting that the level of operational sophistication on display here is unlike anything they have seen from a non-superpower state actor. This was not a rogue strike. This was not a desperate act of aggression. This was a precisely engineered operation designed to inflict maximum long-term damage while leaving Iran with strategic deniability and room to maneuver. And it worked. Stay with us, because in the next few minutes, we are going to break down the exact nature of the strike, the technology Iran used that most Western analysts insisted it did not possess, and the 3 countries that are now in full crisis mode behind closed doors, even as their governments tell the public everything is under control. Because it is not under control, not even close. Let us talk about the physical reality of what has been destroyed. The global natural gas infrastructure is a marvel of engineering and a monument to human interdependence. Thousands of miles of undersea pipelines, liquefied natural gas terminals the size of small cities, compression stations, processing facilities, offshore platforms that produce more energy in a single day than some nations consume in a month. These are the nodes in a network that the modern world depends on completely, and Iran, in a coordinated series of strikes that unfolded over the course of a single night, hit multiple nodes simultaneously, a feat of military coordination that required not just weapons, but intelligence, timing, and a level of operational security that clearly compromised Western surveillance capabilities in ways that have not yet been fully understood. The weapons used are themselves a revelation. Iran has for years been developing what military analysts call a precision asymmetric arsenal, a collection of drones, missiles, and electronic warfare systems specifically designed to overwhelm and defeat the sophisticated air defense networks that protect critical energy infrastructure. The West has known about this program. The CIA has written classified reports about it. The British MI6 has flagged it. Israeli Mossad, arguably the most capable intelligence service in the world, has been tracking its development for over a decade. And yet, on the night of the strike, those air defenses failed. The systems that were supposed to intercept the incoming weapons did not perform as expected. The question that every defense ministry from Washington to Warsaw is now asking in hushed, urgent tones is why. And the answer, when it finally becomes fully public, is going to shake confidence in Western military deterrence to its foundations. Here is something the mainstream coverage is not telling you. The drones Iran deployed in this operation were not the commercial off-the-shelf variants that have dominated recent conflicts. These were purpose-built, long-range, low-observable platforms designed to fly below radar coverage, navigate autonomously using terrain-following algorithms, and strike with a precision that rivals the most advanced Western systems. Some of these platforms carried warheads specifically engineered to maximize structural damage to gas processing equipment, not just to destroy it in the moment, but to make rapid repair impossible. The metallurgical damage alone from the specific type of warhead used means that key components cannot simply be replaced. They have to be redesigned, remanufactured, and retested. We are talking about delays measured not in weeks, but in months, possibly years. And while that reconstruction clock is ticking, the global gas market is already in freefall. Futures prices have spiked to levels not seen since the energy crisis of 2022. European governments are convening emergency sessions. The International Energy Agency has activated its emergency protocols, and the United States, which has been positioning itself as the world's swing producer capable of stepping in during exactly this kind of crisis, is now facing the hard reality that its export infrastructure, its LNG terminals, its shipping capacity, its regulatory frameworks were simply not built to respond at this speed. The gap between what America can supply and what the world now desperately needs is enormous. And every day that gap persists, the geopolitical consequences compound, do not go anywhere, because what we are about to reveal about the countries that are most exposed and about the secret negotiations already underway in back channels that the public knows nothing about is going to fundamentally change how you understand this crisis. There are three nations right now that are at the absolute epicenter of this catastrophe. The first is Germany. Germany made a strategic bet over the course of the last 2 decades that it could build an energy policy around cheap Russian gas, renewable energy development, and the assumption of a stable, rule-based international order. All three pillars of that strategy have now collapsed. Germany's industrial base, the engine of the European economy, the source of its global competitiveness, the foundation of its social contract, runs on gas, not metaphorically, literally. The chemical plants, the automotive manufacturers, the precision engineering firms that make Germany one of the wealthiest nations in human history, all of them need gas. Continuous, reliable, affordable gas. And right now, Germany's energy ministry is running models that show industrial curtailment on a scale that would wipe out years of economic growth in a matter of months. The second country in the crosshairs is Japan. Japan is the world's largest importer of liquefied natural gas. Its entire post-Fukushima energy strategy was built around LNG as the bridge fuel between nuclear power and renewables. Japan has no domestic gas reserves worth speaking of. It has no pipeline connections to alternative suppliers. Every cubic meter of gas that Japan consumes arrives on a ship in liquefied form from one of a handful of producing nations. And now, with supply chains disrupted and global spot prices through the roof, Japan faces a choice between energy rationing and economic contraction. Neither option is acceptable to a government that is already navigating serious internal political pressures. Tokyo is making calls right now that the public is not hearing about, and the concessions Japan may be forced to make to secure energy supplies in this environment could redraw its strategic alignments in ways that reshape the entire Indo-Pacific balance of power. The third country, and in some ways the most dangerous wildcard in this entire situation, is Pakistan. Pakistan is an energy-stressed nation with a large, young, frustrated population, a nuclear arsenal, and a government that has been walking a tightrope between Western alignment and regional pragmatism for years. An energy shock of this magnitude arriving on top of existing economic stress creates exactly the kind of destabilizing pressure that can trigger political collapse, social unrest, and military adventurism. Pakistan's generals have options that Pakistan's politicians do not. And in a crisis environment, the distance between considering those options and acting on them can shrink with terrifying speed. Here is the intelligence detail that almost nobody is talking about. In the 72 hours before the strikes, there was unusual signal activity detected across multiple Iranian military communication networks. Western SIGINT agencies, the NSA, GCHQ, and their allied counterparts picked up fragments of this activity. Analysts flagged it, reports were written, but the interpretation was wrong. The prevailing assessment was that Iran was engaged in routine military exercises, the kind of activity that happens regularly and that analysts have learned to discount. What those fragments actually represented was the final coordination sequence for one of the most audacious energy warfare operations in modern history. The failure was not one of collection. The West was collecting the signals. The failure was one of analysis, of imagination, of the willingness to believe that a country under the kind of economic and military pressure that Iran has faced could actually pull something like this off. That failure of imagination has a cost, and the world is paying it right now. But here is what makes this moment even more complex, even more dangerous, and, frankly, even more fascinating from a strategic standpoint. Iran did not do this alone. The operational sophistication, the intelligence about Western air defense gaps, the precision of the targeting, all of it points to a level of external support and collaboration that raises immediate and urgent questions about who else is involved. The fingerprints of state-level assistance are all over this operation, and the two names that keep appearing in the most serious classified assessments circulating through Western capitals right now are names that should send a chill down the spine of anyone who understands what they mean for the future of the current global order. We are not in a position to name those names definitively today, but we can tell you that the intelligence community's working hypothesis, the hypothesis that is driving policy responses in Washington, London, and Brussels right now, is that this strike was not merely an Iranian operation. It was the opening move in a coordinated campaign by a coalition of revisionist powers who have concluded that the moment to fundamentally challenge the Western-led international order has arrived. And if that hypothesis is correct, then what happened to the global gas supply overnight is not a crisis. It is a warning shot. So what happens next? There are several distinct escalation ways that military planners are now gaming out, and each of them carries consequences that ripple far beyond energy markets. The first pathway is a conventional Western military response, strikes on Iranian military infrastructure, targeting the drone production facilities, the missile programs, the command and control nodes that made this operation possible. This option is on the table. It has been war-gamed. There are strike packages ready, but the costs are enormous. A conventional military strike on Iran risks triggering a broader regional war involving Hezbollah, Houthi forces in Yemen, and Iranian-aligned militias across Iraq and Syria. It risks closing the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day. Close that strait, even temporarily, and the energy crisis currently unfolding becomes something categorically worse. The second pathway is economic. Maximum pressure, not the kind of sanctions regime that has characterized Western policy toward Iran for the past 2 decades, but something fundamentally more aggressive, targeting every financial institution, every shipping company, every energy buyer that does business with Iran, cutting Tehran off from the global economy so completely that the pressure for regime change becomes irresistible from within. This option has its own risks. Iran has already demonstrated that it can absorb enormous economic pain without capitulating, and a regime fighting for its survival is a regime with nothing to lose, which makes it more dangerous, not less. The third pathway is the one that nobody wants to say out loud, but that experienced analysts know is always present in a crisis of this magnitude. Miscalculation, not a deliberate escalation to full-scale war, but a series of moves and counter-moves in which each side believes it is responding proportionally. Each side believes the other will back down before the situation becomes catastrophic, and each side is wrong. History is littered with wars that nobody wanted, started by miscalculations that seemed rational to the people making them at the time. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the escalation in the summer of 1914, the series of decisions that turned a regional conflict in the Middle East into a global confrontation. The mechanisms of miscalculation are always the same. The consequences are always devastating. Here is what you need to understand about the military technology dimension of this story, because it is crucial and it is being systematically underreported. The success of Iran's operation has not gone unnoticed by other actors who have been watching, studying, and drawing their own conclusions. Every military in the world is now conducting a rapid reassessment of its own critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. Every nation that has built its deterrent strategy around expensive, sophisticated air defense systems is now asking whether those systems can actually stop the kind of precision drone swarm attack that Iran just demonstrated. The answer, based on what happened, is deeply uncomfortable. The era of critical infrastructure being protected by layered air defenses may be over. The drone has done to air defense what the torpedo did to the battleship, rendered a previously dominant platform suddenly catastrophically vulnerable. And the implications of that shift are going to reshape military doctrine, defense spending, and strategic deterrence calculations for the next generation. There is one more piece to this story that we have to address, because it speaks directly to what comes next and to what you as an informed, engaged global citizen need to be watching. In the aftermath of a shock like this, there are always two competing forces at work. The first is the force of chaos, the panic, the price spikes, the political recrimination, the blame games, the knee-jerk responses that make complex situations worse. The second is the force of adaptation, the remarkable human capacity to absorb a shock, recalibrate, find new solutions, and emerge from the crisis with structures and systems that are more resilient than what existed before. Which of those forces wins in this situation depends more than anything on the quality of leadership in the key capitals of the world, on whether the people making decisions in Washington, London, Brussels, Tokyo, and Riyadh are capable of the kind of strategic clarity and long-term thinking that this moment demands. The evidence on that front is mixed. It is honest to say that, but history also tells us that crises produce leaders, that the pressure of an existential threat has, on multiple occasions, called forth exactly the kind of decisive, clear-eyed leadership that the moment required. We have to hope that happens now, because the alternative, the world in which the chaos force wins, in which miscalculation tips into conflict, in which a 20% gas supply shock becomes the trigger for something far worse, is a world that none of us want to live in. The story of what Iran has done to the global gas supply is not over. It is, in every meaningful sense, just beginning. The strikes were the first chapter. The response, military, economic, diplomatic, and technological, will be written over the coming weeks and months. And that response will determine whether this moment becomes a footnote in the history of global energy markets, or whether it becomes the opening line of a much darker story. Every decision made in the next 72 hours matters enormously. Every intelligence assessment, every diplomatic back channel, every order given to military units positioned across the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and the Persian Gulf carries weight that extends far beyond the moment in which it is made. You are living through history, not the comfortable, retrospective kind of history that gets taught in schools and analyzed in academic papers. The raw, unfolding, deeply uncertain kind of history that people living through it rarely fully understand in real time. The kind of history where the decisions of a handful of individuals in a handful of rooms can alter the trajectory of civilization. That is the world we are in right now. And the most powerful thing you can do as a citizen, as someone who cares about the world their children and grandchildren will inherit, is to stay informed, to refuse the comfort of simplistic narratives, to demand the kind of rigorous, honest, deeply reported analysis that this moment requires. Because the people who understand what is actually happening are the people who are positioned to respond to it intelligently. And the world desperately needs more of those people right now. Do not let this story slip past you. Do not let the noise of the news cycle bury the signal that this strike represents. Stay alert, stay engaged, keep watching, because in the days and weeks ahead, the developments that follow what happened overnight will tell us everything we need to know about the kind of world we are heading into. The global gas crisis is not just an energy story. It is a military story. It is a technology story. It is a story about power, deterrence, miscalculation, and the fragile architecture of the international order that billions of people depend on every single day. We will be here breaking it down, holding nothing back every step of the way. Hit that notification bell. Share this with everyone you know who needs to understand what is at stake. Because the game has changed, and the only people who can't afford to miss what comes next are all of us.